Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyette, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by La-Z-Boy Home Furnishings. You know La-Z-Boy is a national brand, but its Amarillo store is independently owned and operated by the Hawkins family, who live here in town. And here's the thing, they offer a lot more than just recliners. Amarillo's locally owned La-Z-Boy Home Furnishings has a ton of products in stock. They're ready to take home or deliver today. So go visit the La-Z-Boy of Amarillo showroom at 3636 Soncy. And as part of this podcast partnership with Brick and Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Amarillo Youth Choirs, Amarillo National Bank, Optimal Physical Therapy, and Leslie Massey Farmers Insurance. The new September-October issue of Brick and Elm is available now. It's a really fun one. I encourage you to go pick one up. Today's guest is Jim Wilson, and Jim has one of those multi-hyphenate creative careers that aren't uncommon among people from this area. He's an Amarillo native, but he moved to Los Angeles decades ago to pursue two different careers, one as a piano technician and another as a composer and recording artist. And so as an artist, he's won multiple awards. He's had 2 PBS specials. He's had his recordings hit the Billboard Top 20. He also developed the revolutionary MIDI adapter for the acoustic piano, and we talk about this. And in the process of that, became friends with artists like Paul McCartney, Elton John, Martin Short, and Ray Romano. He's the author of the autobiography Tuned In, and was recently back in Amarillo for the annual Friends of Fogelberg concert. So Jim and I had plenty to discuss in this conversation. Here's Jim Wilson. Jim Wilson, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my honor to have you. I'm glad we were able to get connected during one of your not too frequent trips back to Amarillo.
Getting fewer and fewer. I had my mom and dad lived here. They're gone now.
Okay.
And all my family's is gone. My stepmom's still here, and I had a little home here on 2806 Tyler Street,
okay,
across from Oliver Eckler Park. Mm-hmm. Sold that. But I do love coming back here, and definitely a part of my heart is still here. I'm still an Amarillo boy at heart. Yeah. There's no question about it.
Well, and we should say you just recently came back for Friends of Fogelberg, which people will know as an annual concert series, and I know that has a good connection for you. But before we talk about that stuff, I just want to hear about your connection to Amarillo. So how did you end up growing up here in the first place?
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina. My mom and dad were armed services, both in the Air Force, and they met there. And then my sister was born on an Air Force base in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm sorry, in Greenland.
Greenland, the island in the North Atlantic. Okay.
And then I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, Army base.
Well, that's not quite as impressive as being born in Greenland.
Isn't that crazy? It's just so wild. Then my dad had a whole bunch of different occupations, and he never could quite settle on one. His sister, my Aunt Billy Jo, moved here from Gorman, Texas, and she learned hairstyling.
Okay.
And she opened up the Lady Fair Beauty Salon in Sunset Center, brand new when it was brand new.
When Sunset Center was the place to be, right?
Brand new, man. It was like hot and happening. And her business was expanding, and she called her brother, and she said, "Hey, I've got this new opening here. You could learn to cut hair." And so we moved from Uvalde, Texas, to here to Amarillo. My sister and I'm probably about 4 years old or something, 4 or 5, and then they started working here, a couple of rental homes, and then they bought a home in a brand new development called Olson Park.
Okay,
yeah, that's right on Albert Street, and it's in that house that all my musical aspirations were born. And I guess we'll get into that. But you asked me why Amarillo, and that's how I got here.
You grew up here. Where'd you go to high school?
Tascosa.
Okay.
Rebels, go Rebels.
When did you start figuring out that you had an interest in music or a talent for music? Like when did that become part of your life?
Well, I did write in my book. I wrote a book called Tuned In, Memoirs of a Piano Man, and it's about all my musical adventures of getting to hang out with all my heroes, Paul McCartney and Elton John and all these people. And in this limo ride back to London from Paul McCartney's studio in the south of England, I just had this 4-hour magical hang with Paul singing Beatles songs, and I'm thinking, how the hell does a insecure West Texas kid end up here on the same piano bench as Paul McCartney and later road trips with Carole King and horseback riding with Dan Fogelberg and all that. But I'm just thinking, how did this happen? And it all kind of traced back, Jason, to when I was a kid here in Amarillo. My mom says, hey, I'm about to go return some paintbrushes. Do you want to come with me? I'm thinking, well, it beats doing homework. Sure. So I'm 7-year-old. We jump in our little funky old Peugeot coupe and head over to her friend's house. His name is Toy. What a weird name for him.
Toy,
T-O-Y. What a name for a man, I thought as a kid. And so they're talking their grown-up talk and drinking the Chardonnay, and I'm a bored kid. I'm looking around. But over in the corner, I see this guitar, and I picked up the guitar and started plucking around on it. And later, when we were leaving, Toy says, hey, I saw you plucking around on that guitar. Did you like it? I said, yeah, it's cool. He goes, take it. It's yours. And with that, he changed the direction of my whole life. Wow. Because, they tried to get me to take piano lessons before that. And I thought, man, if music is about these little dots and sticks, I don't want anything to do with music. But guitar, now I had the opportunity to go in my room and kind of mess around on my own and start plucking out and picking out melodies. It truly did. Music became my salvation, I said in my book. And it's true, because I was an insecure West Texas kid, didn't know my place in the world, didn't know how to fit, where I was going to fit in. And this gave me something to morph those feelings of uncertainty and into art, something that pleased me. So that's how I got the initial music bug. And then, I'd be listening to, the Beatles, the Ed Sullivan Show, of course, was ground zero for many hundreds of thousands of musicians. They all lit up and went, wow, how's that even possible to stand there with a guitar and have screaming fans and, whatever they're doing, I want to do it. So, but for me, it was the Beatles and the Monkees and Herman's Hermits. And then later it would be Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. And it's really kind of funny that eventually all that would get tossed into this vat, this cauldron of influences, and some James Taylor guitar riffs, and my mother's love of folk music and Appalachian music. All those things got put into this stew, and it eventually came out as my piano feature, instrumentals.
Was your family a creative family? I mean, did that come as a surprise to you once you really got into playing guitar or starting to, come up with melodies and stuff like that?
Right.
Did it feel like it fit within the family dynamic?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. Neither of my parents played any instruments.
Okay.
But my mother loved the arts, and she was very, very sentimental. And there's a moment I describe in my book where I'm standing beside my mom and she's singing, Shenandoah, I long to hear you far away, rolling river. This beautiful melody, and that moment of seeing my mom in the throes of, just being enthralled with this music and what it meant to her, I think that really permeated my DNA.
Okay.
And it was my mom's love of the arts. I think that got baked in for me. So no, it wasn't a huge surprise to have my melodies come as a means of expression and have them have some folk roots. And I'm sure that's where that came from.
So I know eventually you left here, but before you did, like, was there an outlet for performing when you were here in Amarillo? Was it a place that fostered that kind of creativity?
I was surrounded by friends who were also into music, and we formed duos. There's a guy named Rick Fawcett that we played in a duo and a little trio, and then he eventually took up steel guitar. He's a very prominent steel guitar player around here. And I played in different bands, and then I played in a band called Easy. We were kind of a show band. Played at the Ramada Inn.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Camelot.
The Castle one on I-40?
Yes, that's right.
Which used to be really, really felt kind of nice. And,
yes, and now really,
less so
really
today.
less so. Nicely said. But there was a place upstairs that we played called the Red Lion Inn. And ironically, I just had lunch with Wes Reeves in the Amarillo National Bank.
Yeah.
So downstairs at Panhandler Cafe. It's so funny that he would have chosen that place, because it was at that cafe where I met with my then manager, Walt Myrick, and I was at that time just doing solo gigs on guitar around town. Walt, you got to find me some more gigs, man. Come on. I played the Tascosa Country Club and a few other places. He said, well, there's nothing like that right now that I can book you on, but there is a gig with a band called Easy, the show band. Mm-hmm. They're looking for a bass player. You can play electric bass, can't you? I said, yeah, of course I can. He said, so the auditions are on Monday. Well, this is a Friday at noon. I raced from there to Billy's Band-Aid and got a Fender Jazz bass, Starburst bass on consignment. I spent all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the audition was on Monday. And I took my rudimentary guitar chops, and I'd played a little bit of upright bass, and transferred them to electric bass. And so I went in on that Monday, and I didn't nail the audition then, but I got my foot in the door, and I pestered them so much over the next 2 weeks, they realized, okay, this guy's not going away.
Yeah.
So I got the gig, and that's how I got into the band Easy. I was playing electric bass, and that, boy, that was a fun time.
Was Easy playing mostly in this area, or did that give you a chance to
in the tri-state,
travel a little bit more?
Yeah, there was all the tri-state area here, and then we did gigs in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and Arcola, Illinois, and these nightclubs that I don't know how Walt found them, but it was such a magical feeling jumping in the van with your buddies and the open road ahead of you, and it's so liberating. It's such a wonderful feeling.
Let's fast forward a little bit. Tell me about the decision to leave here.
Right.
I know you ended up in Southern California, and that's where a lot of your career began to expand. Like what made you get out of Amarillo?
The dream was to be the singer-songwriter guy. That was the goal. But part of what supported that dream was playing in the band Easy. Mm-hmm. Charlie Clinton was the keyboard player. I didn't start playing piano until I was 19, and he showed me some riffs on piano. Riffs that would become kind of the cornerstone of my piano styles, these kind of sort of country Floyd Kramer riffs.
Okay.
But also he could tune pianos, and I thought, well, that's a great way to go out and make $25 when you're when you're trying to make it in LA as a songwriter. What a great way to support yourself. So I went to piano tuning school in Cleveland, Ohio. I came back here. I immediately started tuning for the Amarillo Symphony. Okay. Kind of bluffed my way in, and
how long is piano tuning school?
It was that one was a 6-month
was it
course.
Okay.
I mean, there's another one that's a 2-year thing, but this one was a good concentrated thing. Regardless of how long your school is, you have to keep doing it. You get better and better over time. So piano tuning was going to be a means to support myself in LA. So I moved to Los Angeles to become the next Jackson Browne. And as I say, I instead became the next Jackson Browne piano tuner.
What year was that when you left?
79.
Okay.
1879. It was in a covered wagon.
Yeah.
And
it took you 6 months to get there.
Oh, my God.
For someone who has this aspiration to perform, but then that piano tuning is going to pay the bills, how do you get in on the piano tuning scene? Like, was there not enough people with that sort of expertise, and it was easy to kind of get into those places?
Well, here's the irony, Jason, is that by the time I had kind of perfected my craft enough to be able to do it as a job, and then I moved to LA, I was so dead set that I really want to be just a starving artist. I want to be a hit songwriter. I don't want to tune but just a couple of pianos. And after a few months of that, I thought, okay, maybe the starving artist thing isn't for me. So I talk in my book, there's a theme. I call it the power of one, and how one moment can change destiny, and one decision, one chance interaction. Well, that 2-day trip to LA from Amarillo, I arrive on a Monday night at 6 p.m. My friend says, hey, let's go hear this band. They're called Just for Grins. They play music just for amusement, but they're incredible studio musicians. And so I arrive at 6 p.m. At 9 p.m., 3 hours on LA soil, I go hear these guys. They're all amazing. I get introduced to each one. Each of them has pianos. Each of them becomes my champion. Oh my God, he's the best piano tuner.
I know a guy who does that.
Yeah, I got a guy. So, but they're all plugged in, and this one led to tuning for Seals and Crofts. This one led to rebuilding a piano for Supertramp, and this one led to that person, which led to tuning the piano for Chick Corea, who was a legendary jazz pianist. So it was like one of those one moment that can change your whole life. And it was from those guys that it's like a acorn being planted in this huge oak tree.
I want to let people know that, like, you'll talk in depth about all this development of your career in the book, and so I don't want to give away too much of that. But I do want to hit some of the highlights.
Yeah.
And you tuned pianos forever. That was kind of your one way that you met a lot of people in the recording industry, but also you helped develop the MIDI adapter for acoustic piano, which I think listeners might think they don't know anything about, but actually is pretty significant if you've listened to music at all over the past, 2 or 3 decades. So tell me, like, how that happened and what was the process there? And maybe explain what it is to people that don't know.
Sure. Well, let's go back to this power of one thing again. This one little moment when, first of all, I moved to California. My business started taking off just sort of by accident, and started making some good money and tuning for a lot of celebrity people, and Quincy Jones and Barbra Streisand and Barry Manilow, and it developed a really high-level clientele. So I started to hit the snooze button on my artistic aspirations. And then one day at Sunset Gower Studios, I'm tuning the piano for a show called Name That Tune. And it's an empty studio. And across the way, I see this guy, and I think, God, I wonder if that's Chuck Monty. It's this guy who had developed this modification for a Fender Rhodes. Okay. And he was kind of well-known in the music industry. God, I wonder if that's him. I'd really love to meet him. I don't have time. Keep tuning. Keep your head down. Go. But something inside me said, no, go meet this guy. So I stopped, introduced myself. It was indeed Chuck Monty. That relationship, to speed the story along, led to him introducing me to these 2 kids up in San Jose who were working on the very first MIDI adapter for acoustic piano. It's because Steve Solani was working at a synthesizer company, the head of which was talking to the head of Roland.
Okay.
And they had this idea of like, yes, we're all very private about our stuff, but what if we had this little protocol where my synthesizer could talk to yours? You keep your sounds. I'm not going to steal your sounds.
Because this was the 80s when synthesizers were just starting to blow up in popularity. Bands were using them.
That's exactly right. So what if we had this protocol where my synthesizer could talk to yours, and meaning that when I play my synthesizer, I play, you hear mine, but you also hear yours being triggered.
Okay.
So they had this very, very clever idea, and it became Musical Instrument Digital Interface, MIDI. And to my good fortune, one of the guys who was working at Sequential Circuits, Steve Solani, got wind of this new protocol, and before MIDI was even really properly announced, he already was onto the idea of, hey, what if I took some of these synthesizer switches and put them underneath the keys of a piano and adapted this for piano use. So this guy, Chuck Monty, the guy that I said, oh, what the heck, I'm going to get up and meet this guy. Because I did that, I got introduced to these kids, and I got flown up several times to San Jose from Los Angeles to talk to them about the best ways for this to adapt on a piano underneath the keys. And I nudged them to make lower profile keys to interfere with the keystroke less. And this thing got thrown in my lap, and I was, for the longest time, the only guy on the planet you could get this MIDI adapter from, which led to me being flown to England a dozen times by McCartney and Elton and Keith Emerson and Pete Townsend and, the royalty of rock over there.
It allowed you to play an acoustic piano.
Right.
But then the notes would be digitized.
That's right.
And so, as opposed to just like recording it, on tape at the time.
Right. Audio. So you can still record the piano audio, put your mics up, and your piano's going to sound exactly like it always does. However, when you are playing the keys, you're also going to be sending this MIDI signal out of the back of the piano very discreetly, and you don't really even see this thing at all. It's just underneath the keys, and then a CPU is mounted inside the piano, and then a MIDI cable out of the back of the piano into your computer or other synthesizers or whatever. It was a revolutionary thing. It was a very first thing in the history of piano. It was really, really cool. So I got ushered into these, incredible places.
Well, I mean, like Elton John would want to put one of those on his piano and figure out how it worked, and you were the guy who could set that up for him.
Yeah. It was heady times.
How long was that? Was that a thing for you? I mean, did that take over the piano tuning side for a while? Did it become a focus?
At one point, I had my business kind of really expanded, and I had 3 or 4 tuners working for me, and I had somebody kind of running operations and tuning studio pianos, and then we would MIDI 3 or 4 pianos a week.
Okay.
And then besides all the studios in LA, it was all the players had to have it. And then I got flown to the East Coast to do one for Bruce Springsteen, and then for Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who were producing Janet Jackson, flew me to Minneapolis and to Sweden and to all these different places, and England a dozen times.
I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think what's interesting is you were being hired to perform a service for some of these major artists, which is great. Sometimes you just go and you do the work and then you leave.
Right.
But for a lot of them, they became your friends. And I think, if you think of it like, my plumber comes and he fixes my sink, but we don't hang out. Right, I don't text him to see what's going on the weekend. But you develop some of those relationships with, a few of those luminaries that you mentioned. Yeah. I want to know, why? What takes that do a job for me relationship and makes it a little bit deeper than that?
Well, I have given that some thought over the years. And number one, yes, the plumbers, and we're not denigrating.
No.
Of course, we're not denigrating any service.
But it's a service provider.
But if it's a service that, you look in the yellow pages, there's 20 people doing the same thing. It's like, okay, hey, I found a great guy, great plumber. Great. He's a great dude too, yay. But that's different than you are a recording artist creating world-class music, and your instrument is the vehicle of your artistic expression. And this is a highly regarded thing in your life. And there is this new thing, Jason, that is going to allow you to, I can't even describe it. People back then, they were trying to describe this thing. He puts this adapter under your keys, and it allows you to do stuff. I mean, it was historic.
It seemed magic.
Right, it was magic. And then I got ushered. And number one, I was offering something more than just unclogging your drain, And number two, I was being ushered in at kind of a high level, like with McCartney. David Foster, this prominent producer, called McCartney and said, "Hey, this guy is coming to England. You got to get him to MIDI your piano." And there was a buzz about it. So people naturally were a little bit interested in me. And then I suppose it comes down to who you are as a person is always going to come through. And I love connecting with people. I will always explore that boundary, and I'll always try to find a connection. My God, especially if it's like somebody like that, like an Elton or somebody who's changed.
You don't want to just walk in, fix their piano, and walk out without trying to have a conversation with Elton John.
And furthermore, there's the need to actually explain to them, here's what it is. And with McCartney, it was, there's a 30-minute window of like, hey, pleasure to meet you. And it was just so amazing to open your mouth and hear human words coming out because there's meeting a celebrity and then there's meeting a Beatle. And believe me when I tell you, if you're somebody who's of our generation, who their music has permeated your DNA, when you actually meet them, meet a Beatle. It's such an extraordinary thing. And McCartney, such a big presence. So I was able to kind of hold my own, and I had to be present enough to tell him what I was going to do. I was ushered in at a high level to start with that. And then also to say, okay, so this is adapter, this is going to go in your piano. And by the way, I noticed that the touch of this is me being a cheeky bastard, I noticed that the touch of your piano was a little on the firm side. There's things I can do to make it play a little bit more, play lightly and have some more inviting touch. Yeah, how about it? So I signed myself up for a whole bunch more work. So I worked well into the night, and then the next Saturday morning, the next day, he comes in. He's in this light, playful mood, and I kind of tapped into that energy, and I was able to ease into just, I had to be present to go, here's how to work the MIDI adapter, and I could fortunately speak with a bit of assuredness and authority on that, and then within that context of that and sitting on the same piano bench and showing him how it works, he's trying out things. And I said, what's that? Oh, it's a new thing I'm working on. I'm stuck for a middle eight, and which means he was working on a bridge. And, and me crossing the line of decorum, I said, oh, actually, I see you're in the key of C. What about going from B7 to B7 over E to A minor? He tries that. He goes, hey, that's me yesterday change. Oops.
That's why it's familiar to me.
I unwittingly just proposed that Paul McCartney plagiarized himself. So, there is that balance, and I never want to be the guy who's not reading the clues,
right?
Who's not reading the room, and it's just like a overeager puppy dog. Try to lay back, and sometimes you read that okay, this is where this ends, but other times you see an opening and they want to converse. Like with Quincy Jones, he's been a client for 35 years, and just an amazing, legendary cat. And I had restored his Bosendorfer piano for him, and I wanted to walk him through how it went. What we did, and we replaced the strings, we did this, and replaced the hammers, the touch is now this. And so I had to set it up to have a meeting with him, and I showed him. He played 2 or 3 notes on the piano. Yeah, that's great. Let's go sit over here on the sofa. I'm thinking I'm going to show him, do a show and tell. We did this, and he wasn't interested. He just wanted to hang out. So we sat on the sofa, and we started talking about pianos, and so I anytime there was a lull, I would just go, okay, it was so great. And then he would go, yeah, and I'm working on this new thing, and I've got this Snoop is going to be playing this part on that. So there were 2 or 3 times like that where I thought, I want to leave before he has to think that I'm a hanger-on. And he would keep it going. And I finally realized, dude, chill out. He just wants to hang. So I just got into this chill hang mode with Quincy Jones. And he's telling me all these great stories about growing up in Seattle. And he and his childhood friend Ray Charles smoking pot when they were kids, and and what it was like working with Count Basie. It's really cool. So sometimes, you just go prepared to just be there and be present and show them the work you did, or maybe they're not even there, But Queen Latifah is a new client, and she was, again, I thought, God, it'd be great to just meet her, and sure, she comes out, Quincy says you're the best, and we had this great hang, and she introduced, hi, I'm Dana, It's like, they really do want to be seen for who they are and not their persona, or Pink,
Right.
It's Alicia Moore. She's not Pink. She's just Alicia. Hi, I'm Alicia.
I don't want to give short shrift to the second career you have. So, you've got these stories, and those are the technician side of what you ended up doing. But eventually you also found your way back to performing.
Yes.
And that's what has brought you back to Amarillo
Yes,
over the past week. So tell me how you, having put that on pause for so long, why did you move back into it?
Here is the real heart of my book. The book's Tuned In, Memoirs of a Piano Man. The subtitle is Behind the Scenes with Music Legends and Finding the Artist Within.
Okay.
So first part of the book is all the fun window dressing, lots of stories that people get a kick out of. Part 2 of the book is my best friend died of a heart attack at the age of 37. And that is what it took to grab me by the shirt collar and just go, what are you doing, dude? You came out here with a mission. And that was to create some art. So that was what made me realize this thing could be over at any minute. Because just 2 months prior, Claude, my friend who'd written songs for Celine Dion, hit songs, and he was David Foster's, he was the top arranger in LA. But he wanted to make a statement for himself. And 2 months prior to his dying, he played me this piece on piano. I thought, oh my God, this is gorgeous. He was going to put an album together under his own name. That was what he really wanted to do. And there I am 2 months later in his hospital room and holding his cold hand and watching him vaporize into nothing. I'm seeing all those dreams go vaporizing away, and you think, this thing can be over at any minute. So whatever it is you want to do with your life, get on with it. And that was the wake-up call for me. My brother had died 10 years prior of a heroin overdose. It shattered me. But this was different. This is somebody who I could see him actualizing all these dreams one by one. Man, just stand back, people, and watch how it's done. Because Claude is a man of action and vision. And then he died. It's like, oh, I might have to rethink that little belief. Because it can be extinguished at a moment's notice. So that's when I had to kind of stop and realize, okay, that original dream that brought me to LA, that I kept hitting the snooze button on for the longest time, that no longer rang true for me. The whole singer-songwriter thing, it just didn't feel like a path I wanted to go. However, these pieces that I would write on piano, these instrumental compositions that no one's ever going to hear, they're just for my own amusement. And God, doesn't it feel great when I do that thing in B minor, that 16th note pattern with that goes to the sharp 5, and put my James Taylor melodies on top of that. And no one's ever going to hear these, but man, it feels great to play them. When Claude died, I said, okay, if I get that little tap on the shoulder, time's up, pencils down, turn in your assignments as is. I want to be able to have something that I've left behind, that I've done, some sort of artistic statement. So I took these compositions, I recorded them, I cobbled them together, and it was very scary because this is me. This is not writing a clever hit pop song. This is me going, this is my sensitive side. This is what inspires me, you know. And furthermore, I developed this reputation as a top level piano technician, tuning for all these high level artists. And who the hell are you to declare yourself an artist, man? So I had it was a scary, scary move, but I recorded that first album. And there's some fairy dust on that album because it's Northern Seascape, the title cut of which, by the way, I wrote with Dan Fogelberg. Fairy dust on that album because I really did that album, Jason, thinking, okay, if I get that tap on the shoulder, I want this is it. This could be all I leave behind. Well, here I am 10 albums later and 2 PBS specials and 100 million streams of my music.
A lot of people these days define themselves by their career. You know, you meet somebody new, they say, "What do you do?"
Yeah, right.
What do you tell people? Do you say, "Well, I'm a composer, performer, piano tuner. I wrote a book." You know, how do you explain what you do?
My clever response before was, "I write tunes and I tune right." And
that was just on your business card.
Yeah,
right?
Actually I did, and write tunes and I tune right. But now it's, I suppose, a little bit harder to define because the last 4 years have been me stepping out as an author. Mm-hmm. As scary as the move to step out as an artist was, I'm pleased to say that I tuned in Memoirs of a Piano Man, got released in April, and it hit 4 different categories. It hit number 1. It was a bestseller for a while. And the audiobook has just come out, and it's being submitted for Grammy consideration. And,
okay.
And I got little soundbite cameos in there. There's a little section in my book where I'm talking about that moment of releasing my first album, Northern Seascape, and I'm looking at the reviews. Oh my God, it's so exciting. The reviews are starting coming in. And in the book, I quote 4 reviews. And in the audiobook, I was going to read that. This is a great opportunity for fans to, so I had fans do the audio thing in a voice memo, and they'd send me the voice memo. And so in the audiobook, there's fans reading it. And then I thought, what about actually getting some of my high-profile friends? Mm-hmm. So I emailed Martin Short, who's become a client and friend over the last 30 years. So Marty, there's this point in my book where I'm doing the reading the reviews. I'm having folks read it, and would you be up for it? Sure, I'll get to it later today. It turns out he was on the set of Only Murders in the Building, okay. and that was a busy day for them. It's like, so he did that. Ray Romano gave me one. Ed Begley Jr., Lisa Loeb. There's some nice little soundbite cameos in the audiobook. The audiobook is extremely gratifying and it was very emotional for me because I do some deep dives, just some fun window dressing, with these celebrity stories. But there's some hard left turns, and it's a deeply personal journey about my brother dying and my best friend dying and facing the hardships. So it was really emotional narrating the audiobook, but we also got to incorporate 38 pieces of my music. Every time we started incorporating a piece of my music, I would just look at my engineer just going, it's as if I composed that music for that moment,
It fit.
And so it just occurred to me that who knew all these 20 years that when I was composing that music, I was literally composing the soundtrack to my life.
I want to wrap up this section and ask you about Fogelberg, because I know that his legacy is part of why you've come back to Amarillo, at least this year, for that concert. Tell me about that relationship and why it's meaningful for you to participate in an event like Friends of Fogelberg.
Yeah. So
you literally are a friend of Fogelberg.
Yeah. He was one of my closest friends. It's 1977. I'm standing in a Peaches record store. I'm flipping through some albums. This is in Cleveland, Ohio, where I've gone to piano tuning school for 6 months. And they start playing this song on the overhead speakers. It's so mesmerizing, and it has this harpsichord part and these dreamy pads and these beautiful harmonies. I ran to the counter and said, "Who is this?" And he said, "This is Dan Fogelberg." He said, "I'd never heard this artist." That was off of his 4th album. And I bought the album. I went home. I obsessed over it. I read the liner notes. Little did I know, this guy who'd become my hero now would become a closest friend. He'd invite me to his ranch in Colorado over half a dozen times. We'd go skiing together and horseback riding and midnight sled rides together, and these music hangs that would go well into the night till 3 or 4 in the morning, and with over progressively better and better bottles of wine. And ultimately, he would become like this big brother, and a champion of my music, and who would sing or play or co-write on 3 of my records. Okay. And it's something that he'd never, ever done. So he was an extraordinary man. Besides being an incredible singer-songwriter, and look at the wake of his passing. There's all sorts of fan pages and there are these pilgrimages that go back to Peoria, Illinois every year. There's one just now. And then you look at Joe Ed Kaufman's effort, just because he was a fan. He started this beautiful effort honoring his music, but look at the lives that he's saved.
Right,
in the wake of his passing.
Prostate testing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So beyond being this incredible singer-songwriter, he was also just a wicked funny and this brilliant sense of humor. And God, I love to make him laugh. And what an honor to pay tribute to him.
Yeah, tell me about the fact that this is that Fogelberg, Friends of Fogelberg, was an event paying tribute to him and his music, which you probably would have participated in anyway, but it's also here in Amarillo, and it's become a central event in Amarillo, where you grew up, where you're like those two things kind of coming together.
This full circle thing, right? I know it is really bizarre, and I haven't performed in a long time, and the Friends of Fogelberg thing was an incredible opportunity to get out and perform, and it's because Dan meant so much to me. It made it something I really, really wanted to do, and to be willing to confront the fears of performing. And there's the panic attacks and that I write about in my book, and all these other obstacles I had to overcome. But there is a higher purpose to that, and it's honoring his music. It's helping to raise money for cancer research, and get guys screened for prostate cancer, and hopefully Dan's life will be as a little light and a reminder to get yourself checked, and his music and his memory is helping to save lives.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Dr. Eddie Sauer, who practices general dentistry at Shemin Dental Group. Eddie has been my dentist since I was in college. He's taken care of my kids' teeth. Dr. Sauer is a national speaker on Invisalign and uses that technology to improve his patients' smiles and positioning. We've used it in our family with great success. Learn more by following Shemin Dental on Facebook or visit shemindental.com. That's SHEMEN. This episode of Hey Amarillo is also supported by the Shops at Wolfland Square, which is celebrating 60 years and 4 generations of local ownership and management. Wolfland Square itself is a shopping center where most of the tenants are local. In fact, you've heard a lot of those entrepreneurs interviewed in the past on this podcast. These shops attract thousands of shoppers every day, and the management works hard to make sure every tenant is successful. They offer free social media marketing for all tenants, with a regular schedule of community events throughout the year, including Holiday Open House this fall. You can learn more by visiting wolflandsquare.com or visit any of the shops at Wolfland Square. Okay, I'm back with Jim Wilson. Jim, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum and Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes a variety of Pleistocene fossils discovered at a site near Cedar Canyon, including the skeletal remains of a ground sloth, dire wolf, and a prehistoric horse. The Texas Panhandle is one of the richest sources of Pleistocene Ice Age fossils in North America, which is interesting to me. You can see those and learn more at panhandleplains.org. Okay, first question. When you think of the Amarillo area 10 years from now, what do you hope for? And this is me understanding that you don't live here full time.
Right,
you
right.
return from time to time. You're familiar with it. What would you like to see here?
Well, Palo Duro Canyon, many fond memories there. Second largest canyon in America. When I come back in 10 years, I want it to be the deepest. I realize that's going to take a lot of shovels, a lot of hard work.
Go in and change the.
Come on, let's. It's number 2. Let's try hard. Let's make it number 1. It's going to take a lot of digging to make it deeper than the Grand Canyon, but people can do it. Let's do this, people.
We are hardworking people. I don't know if we have enough volunteer work to get that done. I don't know. I kind of like being the second largest because that feels different.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Let's advertise being the
Number
second.
2. We try harder.
Okay. Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Oh, well, it certainly has enough wide open spaces. I guess you could. That leads to the wonderful sunsets.
After you left here, did you miss the wide open spaces?
Absolutely.
Is that something that you found kind of embedded in your psychology?
Yes, absolutely. And the big cumulonimbus clouds, we never get that out in California.
Right.
And that's one great thing about here.
Okay, what does this area not have enough of?
One thing that Southern California has is some great places to go dirt bike riding and through the Santa Monica Mountains. And there's a lot of wide open spaces here. I suppose one could argue that you do have some Palo Duro Canyon and some other places.
The Canadian River.
Canadian River, yes. Where actually I used to go motorcycle riding many, many years ago. So there's so many things to do in LA. At some point it becomes overload. So many choices, you just can't make up your mind.
Yeah.
And you get this paralysis of you don't end up doing anything. And all there's just tons of artists to go see. And Toto just played at the Hollywood Bowl, and that's only 15 minutes for me, but it's just the hassle of traffic and all that. So maybe there's something to be said about a smaller town and ease of getting around, and you're more apt to go out and see friends. That's something that Amarillo does have a lot more than LA, is the sense of community, where you can just, your friends are nearby, and
it's not a 45-minute drive to get to them.
I mean, LA is 8 million people and spread out over this dozens and dozens of miles. And it's a megapolis, and it's very overwhelming, and traffic and crime and smog. Wait, I'm kind of talking myself into moving back here.
Okay, well, we'll take you. There's houses for sale on my block.
I'm in.
Let's move in that direction. What's your favorite local neighborhood here in Amarillo?
I think the first one Puckett Place is great. I love the interesting design of it, and honestly, there's so many neighborhoods around here where I think I could sell my home in LA and
you could buy a block here, probably, right?
God, it's just so overpriced. But Bishop Hills, I think, is one of my favorite neighborhoods, just because it's such an interesting place. It's kind of the best of all worlds. It's a bit remote, but it's a proper community. Of course, at Christmas, it became a tradition with my family to go out and look at the lights. But yeah, Bishop Hills has got a lot of character. Beautiful.
Okay, what's your favorite Amarillo area restaurant?
I'm going to have to kick it back to nostalgia for this.
Okay.
Stanley's Drive-In, fond memories. I'm sure it's way before your time.
I've seen like the advertising for it.
That was the hang.
Okay.
That was the hang. You would go drag Polk Street and just drive up and down it and see your friends and honk and wave, and then go to Stanley's Drive-In for a burger and a shake. Then the next one that comes to mind is Sutphen's Barbecue.
I remember Sutphen's.
Oof, man, those are the best ribs. And then kick it way back, Top of the Village. I wonder if there's any of your listeners who even know what Top of the Village was. Wolfland Village, on the second story of some building there, there was a restaurant called Top of the Village.
So I think it was like a Colbert's.
Yeah.
That was a 2-story building there.
Yeah.
I used to buy, that's where you would go get polo shirts in the 80s when I was a middle schooler.
Yeah.
So I don't know that restaurant, but that would have been the building.
Yeah, Top of the Village.
That covers some good nostalgia there.
Yeah.
You've lived in a lot of, or in places outside Amarillo. What's the most underrated aspect of life here in the Panhandle?
I think we just kind of covered it. It's the lower crime rate, the lower traffic, beautiful sunsets. I do miss that. Beautiful, gorgeous sunsets. I suppose California does have the plus of looking out over the ocean, watching the sun.
Unobstructed view, if you want it there.
Yeah. And Palo Duro Canyon, of course, is really a very cool place to visit, and it has a lot of memories for me.
Okay. What's your favorite building in Amarillo?
Well, maybe the Amarillo National Bank building. I just had lunch in the basement, but atop there is a restaurant with a view. If I have it correct.
Yeah.
Am I thinking of another
You're
building?
thinking of, it's now called the First Bank Southwest Tower.
Oh, I see.
It's
okay.
the Amarillo National Bank one is the big black one.
Okay.
And then the tallest one used to be the Chase Tower. Now it's
Yeah.
the First Bank Southwest Tower. And the Amarillo Club was at the top of it.
Okay. Amarillo Club.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And because of the view, I'm a sucker for any place with a view. And anytime I go to another town, a new town, I always want to try to find a restaurant with a view.
Mm-hmm.
The other favorite building here would be the GNC, the Globe News Center. It's the pinnacle of my book, and it's everything leads to that big finale in my book of me having to muster every bit of my every skill that I've ever learned, piano playing and composing the songs that I composed. I had to have the performance videos that are above and behind me when I perform, so I had to produce those. I had to do the charts for everybody. I had to muster the courage to slay the dragon, my fear of performing in public places, fear of having a panic attack at the wrong time. And
because that was a PBS special, right?
So PBS special. Like I said, it was the culmination of everything. It's like everything good in my life kind of came together at this one moment. And for this incredible night, and it's on. You can see a lot of it on YouTube.
Okay. And last question: when was the last time you visited Cadillac Ranch?
Oh God, let's see. My sister now lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we drive from Albuquerque to Amarillo, and of course, you're tempted every time to stop, and I'm always reminded of. Crazy old Stanley Marsh, and he was quite the figure. Not everybody around now knows that character, but he was such a avant-garde, peculiar character. And friends of mine worked for him at Toad Hall. Yes.
Especially, like if you were coming of age in the 70s, that was the heyday.
That's right.
All that stuff.
That's right. He had a wind light thing, this neon thing, so you could drive north of town and park your car, and it had this neon light structure that would respond to the wind forces. The harder the wind would blow, the more the lights would change, and we used to go out there and look at that, of course.
All right, well, that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
I'm going to endorse the A.J. Swope Foundation. I love what they're doing. I'm so moved by his story and learning about who he is and was, and the efforts that are going on in his wake. And he wrote some really great music, So God, died at 27. It's just so tragic. And then also the Harrington Foundation, what they're doing for cancer research and all that. So they have my hearty endorsement. Okay, 2 great nonprofits and a great way to end this. Jim Wilson, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Jason. It's been an honor. And that concludes the episode. Thanks to Jim for the interview. You can find out more about his career, his music, his recordings, and the book Tuned In at jimwilsonmusic.com. Thanks also to Lazy Boy Home Furnishings, Shim & Dental, the shops at Wolfland Square, and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Corey Burns, Josh Wood, Jason Burr, Patrick Burns, Wes Reeves, Katie Linger, Barbara and Jim Witten, and Cindy Graham. This has been episode 369.
My name is Jason Boyette, and I'll see you next week.